Hey, yeah, so I wanted to make a video about how I think people today are just so intolerant. And it's often this thing that's like really pushed by both. I say both sides, by the way, because typically we have this understanding in this country that you're either a Republican or you're a Democrat, or you're one of those people that rejects the whole system, right? You're either on the right or you're on the left, or maybe you're in the center somewhere. You're either a liberal or a conservative, or maybe you're some other type of ideology, We have this very two-way centric system of viewing things, and it's incredibly problematic because it doesn't really provide a sense of independent thought. I mean, one of the big things that we did in senior year government was we were talking about how we were talking about these things like conservatism and liberalism, and we were talking about the Republicans and the Democrats. And I think having an understanding of the two political parties in this country, I think having the understanding that they hold those ideologies is fair, because broadly speaking, Republicans they stand for the ideology of conservatism. Broadly speaking, the Democrats stand for the ideology of liberalism. But, you do have these other ideologies like socialism, communism, and so many other even more obscure ones, right? We have libertarianism, which is becoming a very popular one in this country. We have authoritarianism, which is kind of like a catch-all term, as how I see it, for people who are not libertarians or anarchists or some variant of liberty-oriented folks. We have tons of different other philosophical systems. I mean, we have this one called anti-establishmentarianism, which is that is a really long word, but it does have a meaning. And the meaning of anti-establishmentarianism, for anyone who doesn't know, is a philosophical system that kind of portrays things in a very populist framework. It's basically populism, because the kind of the central vocal point of populism is viewing society that one lives in as having this elite class that needs to be defeated. It's a very big thing in conservative politics in America right now, because it's kind of been used to characterize the deep state in philosophical terms. So again, the rise of right-wing populism has been kind of big in this country. My point is that philosophy is so much more complex and so much more crazily diverse than just left and right, conservative and liberal, Republican and Democrat. And at least with conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, at least those terms, they don't try to encompass everything, right? Some people will try to say, when talking about American politics, they encompass everything. They don't. They just don't. If you are somebody who is a socialist, you pretty foundationally can't be a liberal, because some of the founding principles of liberalism hindered on capitalism. Some of the earliest liberals were capitalists. They just viewed capitalism as not really the problem they were trying to progress away from. It wasn't the thing they disagreed with the traditionalists or conservatives on mostly. It was something that they kind of agreed on. It wasn't until you saw just a hyper increase in polarization. And again, America's always been a relatively polarized country. It's one of the big problems that I think we do need to address with some of our systems. It's we've always been a very polarized country, but this notion of left versus right, it is incredibly polarizing as far as how I see it. And I guess I just wanted to talk about this is why people hate each other. This is why people view each other as just vermin, even when they haven't even looked into other people's beliefs. They haven't even looked into like what the specific values of others are. As soon as you hear someone's a Republican or a Democrat, your first thought is to have this preconceived notion of what the loudest Republicans and Democrats in our society are. The reality is that as we go into this presidential election, okay, the reality is that there will be tens of millions of people who vote for Donald Trump, and there will be tens of millions of people who vote for Kamala Harris. And the reality of that is going to be that you are going to see people who have very different political beliefs agree on which box they check off on. You are going to have people who vote for Kamala Harris who are very conservative yet they just like don't like Donald Trump, right? You will see people like that, okay? Like the Bushes. The Bushes are a really good example. The Bushes will be voting for Kamala Harris. And then you will see people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and you cannot say they have the same beliefs because they just objectively do not. They don't have the same values. You will see people like, you will see in some cases, I think this is less the case with Trump supporters, just because Trump and his base have really focused on just getting a very specific group of Americans to support them. But you will see a lot of Americans who are rather liberal and support a lot of Democrats down ballot and are pro-choice, right? Because there's a huge, like statistically we know there's a huge population in the Republican Party that is pro-choice. You will see a lot of Americans in, positions of being independents, maybe even Democrats, and you will see them vote for Donald Trump because of, as far as I'm aware right now, mostly economic factors. They're mostly going to be voting for him because they do not like the status quo under President Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris has not provided to them a feasible alternative. Now, this is another big thing because for the most part, I'm making this video, yes, to talk mainly to conservatives who are kind of treating people who vote for Kamala Harris as like despicable. But to me, there is a lot more understanding broadly when you take every single person who's going to vote for Donald Trump. There's a lot more understanding of, in general, those people than people who vote for Kamala Harris, because a lot of the support for Kamala Harris is founded based on people who do not like Trump. Like that is a lot of what this campaign has been, and it is very difficult. It is going to be very annoying, frankly, when I have to vote for Kamala Harris, because I don't view Donald Trump's vision as being one that is going to be beneficial for the country. It's not even a matter of policies. Like, I just do not think he is the person I want to be in the White House. It's also a matter of, like, Kamala Harris isn't providing, I think, good changes from the Biden administration. She has over and over and over again said that she wouldn't change things from Biden. And, people are trying to tout her as this change candidate, and it's just not getting across to people. I want it to be clear to people who vote for Kamala Harris that people who vote for Donald Trump are not all these like white supremacist, fascist individuals, right? You have neighbors who are probably going to be voting for Donald Trump. When you take the fact that in New York, you are probably going to see at least 40% of our population vote for Donald Trump. And that takes into account New York City, which will have much higher rates for Kamala Harris. So up here in the Hudson Valley, it's going to be a lot more, you're going to see a lot more Trump voters. You are going to have neighbors, people who you have known for much of your life. You are going to have people that you probably adore who are going to vote for Donald Trump. And a lot of them will not tell you. They will not tell you because they do not feel comfortable telling you who they voted for in a two-way system, okay? I think it is pretty evident right now that people who are voting for Kamala Harris, by and large, are much more willing to say they are voting for Kamala Harris than people who are voting for Donald Trump. Because if you tell people you're voting for Donald Trump, the immediate reaction is that, you know, you're going to dispel fascist dictatorship upon this country. When, you know, right now we have two choices, and Americans are going to take that reality as it is. They're going to take two choices and they're going to say, right now, what do I prefer more, right? Or honestly, what do I not like the least? That is what that's what American politics has become in a lot of ways today. It has become, which person do I dislike less? And that is a system that will not yield you results. It will not yield you results you like. I guarantee you, no matter, like, there's a lot of people who support Kamala Harris who are like, yeah, I don't like her for this, this, and this, and this, but, you know, I still cannot understand how you would vote for Donald Trump. It's like, okay, but you're giving, like, you're handing out reasons right there. You know, because again, there is no feasible third option. There is no feasible third option. If you are not voting, or you are voting for a third option in a first past the post system, you are essentially wasting your vote. Assuming we don't have some dramatic comeback from RFK, like, every American voter knows that doing anything other than voting for Trump or Harris is 109% likely to be a vote that is just being thrown away. So Americans aren't willing to do that. And, you know, you will see that there will probably be a lot of third party votes because people will feel as though kind of they are making, you know, like, their grievances heard about the system, which fair. But they also know, like, they know that's not going to produce a win for the person they're voting for. They know they're probably throwing away a vote for someone, but they don't care. And instead of convincing these people, instead of convincing people who aren't going to be voting for Kamala Harris, right? Harris supporters and voters, as I've observed it on social media and just in real life as well, they have resorted to shame. They've resorted to shaming people who aren't going to vote for who they want to vote for, even though they acknowledge there are two choices, and they acknowledge that both choices have a lot of things to dislike about. They acknowledge that, but they see what they are going to do as such a common sense thing to do that they cannot fathom someone having alternative perspective. They cannot fathom someone having a viewpoint that is not theirs. And that is, to me, so much more of a threat to consistent progress, to consistent upholding of some of these basic democratic principles we have in this country. It is more consistent a threat to foundational aspects of our republic than anything that Trump could really ever do at this point. Because to start civil conflict at the degree that would be able to manifest a war, you do need that degree of bitter hatred and of just viewing not even just the people who have certain political opinions, but just vote a different way, right? That is what's required to have that degree of civil unrest that creates very, very bad situations for countries. So to me, you know, I understand why people are upset at the prospect that Trump might win, but I think they need to more so be looking at what the Harris campaign can do to convince these people to vote for them, rather than blaming the voters. Because I guarantee you, blaming the people who make these decisions, blaming them, right, instead of blaming the people that have the duty, like, people have more of an expectation right now for voters than for Kamala Harris. That's to me, that's such a problem. Like, you guys should be going to your campaign that you intend to support through and through and saying, listen, these are the issues that are very important to people. You need to start talking about this and less about Donald Trump, who has this main character energy that a lot of Democrats hate, and yet they support politicians who actively push it. They support politicians like Pat Ryan, my congressman, who I will not be voting for because he had a terrible debate performance, but that's a whole nother thing. Watch my other video, right? They support these politicians that actively push these ideas, and there isn't enough advocacy for things like ranked choice voting, things like getting it so that there's less money involved in politics. It's like people who are very, very liberal and very, very partisanly Democrat, more importantly, they have this expectation of others when they are not willing to do the basic things that would allow others to feel more represented. They're not willing to do it because they expect you and I's votes. They expect it. And to me, like, it's a big problem when you start to look at your friends and family and you expect them to do the right thing and vote a certain way. To me, that's such a problem because, again, the campaigns should be convincing us. It should not be the other way around. The campaigns should have the duty to get our votes, not the other way around. If Kamala Harris loses to Donald Trump, it will probably be one of the most embarrassing defeats in modern history, hands down. Because when you look at past failed presidential campaigns, right? 92 Bush, there were very obvious reasons why he lost. 96 Dole. Again, Clinton was just a very popular president at the time, or at least he was popular enough to win the election. 2000 Gore, that one was a close one, so I'll give you that. That's a very interesting situation there. 2004 Kerry, he just had the degree of national unity behind him. 2008 McCain, great guy, but, seemingly just didn't have that kind of energy behind his campaign. When you look at some of these failed campaigns, they all have things about them where it's like, okay, I understand why they lost, but now suddenly, we have a campaign that is going to lose to somebody who has done everything possible to make people who don't, so aggressively support him feel miserable, right? Because, yeah, Trump has been, I would say, very sort of oppositional to people who are even on the fence about this. And he's directed his base to do that. I mean, his people within his base are like, yeah, in any fair election, Trump wins easily because we all know he's the better option. It's like, they're actually not, they're not as big about, shitting on people who vote for Kamala Harris. They're just big about talking about how those people don't exist. That's a whole nother problem, and I probably will make a video on it at some point. But, this issue with Harris voters and support, more importantly, supporters, people who are very ardently pro-Harris, right? They view this as a problem with the voters rather than a problem with the campaign. And we know 2016 was a problem with the campaign. Because look at the numbers. Go to the Wikipedia pages. Look at the popular vote numbers. Look at how few people Hillary Clinton was able to get out for her campaign compared to 2020 Joe Biden, right? Look at that, okay? Kamala Harris will probably beat her, and she might still lose because the Trump base is energized. The Harris base is not, as far as I am aware right now. So, I will be doing tomorrow a final prediction for the election ahead of November 5th on my Instagram. But right now, I think just in general, right now the Trump campaign is set up to win because not because of their successes, but because of the failures of the Harris campaign. Because I think when you constantly get concerns from Americans about how the economy just isn't serving them well enough, right? People feel like they're getting poorer. When you have constant concerns about that, and your response is always, well, actually, your experience is like, these are people who, with a lot of social issues in their country, they talk about how you need to look at people's perspectives. You need to not invalidate their experiences. But now, when it comes to things like economics, suddenly that argument is out the window. Suddenly, people's experiences do not matter. Because, technically inflation's going down, so technically everything's fine. No, inflation as a statistic is fine. That doesn't mean that we don't have people in this country, substantially a lot of people in this country who are, they feel like they're in deep shit. And this campaign has treated it from just from my perspective, from how I've seen things play out. They've treated it like it is the responsibility of the voters to do the right thing, rather than the responsibility of the campaign to do the right thing and do what it takes to defeat a man that I do not think should be president again. And it's incredibly disappointing. As someone who's going to vote for Kamala Harris, it is incredibly disappointing to see this other campaign do a lot to try and get people to not vote for them. It is very disappointing, just not even budging at all on the Israel-Gaza issue. Not even establishing that, Israel, yes, has the right to defend itself, but does not have the right to do what it currently has been doing for months now, right? Not budging on that. Viewing the economic concerns of millions of Americans as just, they just ignore them, right? And when they don't ignore them, they just kind of invalidate them. Right? Not providing anything new from the Biden administration. Not saying, hey, the Biden administration actually, we didn't really do this right the first 4 years. We're going to fix it. It provides zero incentive for everyday Americans to vote for this campaign, other than stop Donald Trump. Which I guarantee you're not going to see 81 million Americans want that again. I mean, I won't guarantee that. I'll say this. I won't guarantee that. I think, again, turnout's a tricky thing. We easily could see, again, record numbers of voters compared to 2020. But I wouldn't be surprised if she does not get 81 million votes, just because right now, I think conditions are very different from 2020. 2020, we had an incumbent Republican, a massive pandemic, tons of people were dying. We had an economic crisis in the makings. Everybody was freaking out. It was ideal, perfect conditions for Democratic turnout. This year, we don't have that, guys. We don't have that. I think Alan Lichtman, all the people saying, Kamala Harris actually has a real chance, I don't think they're right. I think he's going to win. And I think there's going to be a lot of blaming. There's going to be a lot of hatred at voters. There's going to be a lot of people talking about, how the voters got it wrong. There's going to be a lot of people who are furious. And, there's going to be then a lot of people who kind of realize, hey, what did the campaign do wrong? What did the Kamala Harris campaign do that caused this loss? And that analysis will start to look very similar to the analysis on the Hillary Clinton 2016 campaign. And Americans will start to realize that this message of not being Donald Trump, it has actively given him 2 4-year terms in the White House. And it cannot continue because it does not work. So, that's how I view that. That's going to be the end of that.